Okay, Chair, we're live on YouTube, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Placemaking in Exmouth Town and Seafront Group, 23rd of January 2024. I am your Chair, Councillor Nick Bookwood. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. May I remind colleagues that the Code of Conduct is throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any devices are off or to silent. In the event of a break in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. 15 minutes. If we are not able to reconnect, we will consider this meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Should you wish to be called, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway, please.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward. Councillor Matt Hall.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Anne Hall.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley. And from Exmouth Town Council, Councillor Deasy, please.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
Present.
Thank you. And I can confirm that we're correct, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So, agenda item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, Sarah?
No, we have no apologies.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of November 2023. Do any members of the committee have comments on the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of November 2023? If so, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no hands raised, I will take it that you're happy that the minutes are received and noted. Do we have any hands raised? No? Okay, right.
No, Chair.
No, so those minutes are there received and noted. Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. This will be done by roll call. When your name is called, please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to. State what exactly your interest is and the specific type of interest you are recording. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway.
Non-registrable interest. I'm a member of Exmouth Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Hall, please.
NRI as an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Anne Hall.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, please.
I'm also an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Deasy.
Sorry, representing Exmouth.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey, please.
Just my usual one, Sarah. I've got 3 hats on today, as a ward member, as the portfolio holder for strategic planning, and as chair of Exmouth Town Council. I'll try and make it clear which capacity I'm speaking in.
That's helpful. Thank you, Councillor. And are there any other councillors in the meeting that need to declare an interest for any of the items on the agenda, please? Okay, we have none. So I'll pass back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So agenda item 4, public speaking. We have one member of the public registered to speak, Mrs. Anne Membry. Welcome to you, Anne. You have 3 minutes with a 30-second timeout at the end. Over to you. Thank you, Anne.
Can we unmute Anne?
Unmute remotely.
Hello?
That's it, we can hear you.
Okay. Having listened to the whole report from WSP for placemaking in Exmouth Town and Seafront, it sounds as though some of the contents of the report will be impossible to achieve and not very realistic. Reduction of car parking spaces was mentioned a lot, but if more people are encouraged to visit Exmouth, there will be a need for more car parking spaces. As Councillor Young mentioned, people now take all sorts of equipment with them to the beach in the summer, and a car is a necessity. And in the winter, dog walkers who come from far and wide to exercise their dogs on Exmouth Beach arrive by car. As this is a report to cover the next 10 years, I think by the end of this period, with the change of weather patterns and rising sea levels, Exmouth Seafront will be a completely different environment in the future. Councillor Young made reference to the damage caused to the seawall, and in the future, with the change of weather patterns and the rising sea levels, walls and buildings adjacent to the seafront will obviously sustain more damage. I have been suggesting for a long time that there should be an electric shuttle bus from the Mayor Car Park, which takes the same route as the land train that would connect up with passengers coming to Exmouth by train, and it will also give visitors at the seafront access to the town. I would support a park and ride site on the outskirts of Exmouth. I think the land, which was once the old fun park at Queen's Drive, should be developed into attractions with both inside and outside attractions for all generations to enjoy, and which are affordable to members of the public who are at the lower end of the income spectrum. I would like to know how it is possible for a 36-month temporary planning application for this land, which expired on February 2022, has now become permanent. Doesn't temporary mean temporary? What are the future plans for Harbour View Cafe? I know the lease of the building keeps being temporarily extended, but what are the plans for this building? Can you tell me when the report by WSP will be made public so as East Devon District Council taxpayers can make their comments? I don't think there has been enough mention of protection of wildlife and environment in the report by WSP. Finally, what have the financial costs been to East Devon District Council taxpayers to produce this report by WSP? Thank you. I'm sorry, I hope you could hear all that. I rushed to get my in my 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Anne Membry. Thank you, Mrs. Membry. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I heard most of it. More than happy for you to email me your questions so we can make sure they go into the minutes effectively. It raised a huge number of issues there. I'm very grateful that you have done so. We are aware of every single one of those. The one about the shuttle buses is an interesting one, which has not come up before, although think about a tram system, but that was not accepted. So I thank you for your comments, and I'll pass over to Jerry Mills to see if there's any particular response as well. Jerry.
Chair, thank you. Hi, Anne. Just a couple of points. We talk about repurposing the car parks. We're not actually intending to reduce the car parking capacity. We're simply moving it to alternative locations. In regard to the seawall, you'll see that it is noted that any developments on the seaward side would have to take account of the changing environment and the shifting patterns of the sand. In terms of the temporary uses, I have answered this question on multiple occasions. So what we had at what's known as Queen's Drive space was a third application for its temporary uses. And when we took that to our colleagues in planning, they decided that that should then become permanent. It's slightly clumsy in its wording in that it is a permanent planning consent for temporary uses. If we wish to change the use of Queen's Drive, we quite simply have to make a fresh planning application. Like I said, it is very clumsy language, but it is the language that we are rather stuck with. In regard to this site, which is currently Harbour View Cafe, you'll see that that is clearly mentioned as a medium to long-term aspiration in terms of what to do with that building, given its current state of disrepair. In regard to wildlife and environment, I think that that's very, very clearly mentioned, and we have said previously that that would be a horizontal principle. We will be commissioning some habitat regulations assessment at a high level to make sure that the plan is compliant with those. And in regard to the cost to produce the report, the total budget was 160,000. I can't give you the exact figure, which WSP quoted, but it was slightly less than that, £160,000. That is all published and on the internet, Chair. So anybody can see that. That is the one thing that we agreed at the outset that we would do to make sure that absolutely everything we did was published and is clear and transparent. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, that does. Okay. Right. So thank you very much. I can't see any hands raised, and therefore I thank you very much indeed, and when we through your comments. Okay. So moving on to agenda item 5, a progress update on the Exmouth Town and Seafront. Over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Chair, if I could just welcome the team from WSP. So we have Gayatri and Ashira who will be making the presentation there. You can see them, they're online. I just wanted to say hi, make sure that everybody knew you were here. I think Ash is here as well. Yeah, he is. Okay. Chair, a very, very short report because the main event is really the presentation from WSP. So I'll just crack on if that's okay with you.
Yes.
So very, very straightforward from our point of view. Really, what we've been aiming to do is just to give you a very, very brief update, and that brief update, when I get to the right part in the report, is that we now are issuing leases to 4 out of the 5 pitches on Queen's Drive to allow them to renew for another season. Our colleagues in asset management and legal services are currently preparing those. We have costed some minor facelift work at Queen's Drive from our existing budget. That is not additional, it's existing, which is mainly looking at the covers over the tables and potentially some lighting, which we're struggling to get suitable fittings, which can withstand the weather at that location. The vacant pitch on Queen's Drive will be marketed by our colleagues in asset management to try and ensure full occupancy for the season. The event space is currently being marketed. We do have a bit of a question mark because we have our colleagues in engineering have asked us if they could potentially use part of the site to the rear for some storage in regard to the sea wall works. So that's a work in progress, Chair. I'll try to keep you informed on that. We have agreed, along with our colleagues in the events team, to work with the traders to try to put together a launch day for the season and also to try to facilitate some entertainment in the traders area around the food pitches. Chair, moving on then, levelling up, again, could I just stress to members, this is not an EDDC-led project. The levelling up bid was secured through Devon County Council. So we have met with the Devon County Council colleagues on the 11th of December to discuss the levelling up project. It's also known as Exmouth Active Travel Improvements, and we also refer to it as the Gateway or Destination Exmouth. So apologies if that does cause a little bit of confusion. They did carry out, that is, Devon County Council carried out further consultation on the 6th of December with 2 in-person events, and they also had an online consultation. Chair, just to emphasize, a number of people have written to me expressing views on that. I have on each occasion said you need to represent your views to Devon County Council on this, because I can't actually complete their online feedback. And really, from my point of view, I mean, unless and until we have an absolutely clear and agreed position on it, over and above the position that was previously to match fund and to be a project partner on this, that's the only view that I can give out there in a public sense. I cannot represent the views of all the individual stakeholders who have an opinion about the Exmouth Gateway. Not trying to be unhelpful, I'm just trying to emphasize where we currently sit with that, Chair. Chair, I'm happy to pause for a moment and take any questions on that, if that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Do any members have any questions? I can't see any hands raised. So the answer is okay. Please carry on, Jerry. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I beg his pardon. Councillor Davey, Ollie.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, Jerry, if there'd been any discussion of kind of shared use of land, because a number of people have made the point that if DCC were talking to East Devon, they could be discussing the use of some of East Devon's land to permit some of the changes that they want to make, for instance, widening the shared path that runs along near the leisure centre. And I just wondered if there'd been any discussion regarding the sort of shared use of the land there, because it's been a kind of slight source of frustration in Exmouth, and I think I've got my chair of town council hat on at the moment, Sarah, that a number of people have said, well, why aren't they talking to East Devon District Council? So I'm pleased to hear that they have, but I'm just wondering if that was discussed. Thank you.
Chair, happy to come back on that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. Yeah, there have been informal discussions with us in regard to land, and that dates back to even even back to the pre-application stage of this. So what we've tried to make clear is that if there's a way of us enabling the project through use of some of our land at that location, we'll make every effort to do that. So really, from our point of view, I mean, it's quite straightforward. We're not here to put obstacles in anybody's way. The team, both from WSP and also from Devon County Council, know that there is a channel for them to do that, and they can channel that through me and through our colleagues in asset management.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. Okay, right. Okay, all right. So thank you, Jerry, on that item. We will now move forward to agenda item 6, the formation of a subgroup and amending the terms of reference to the placemaking in Exmouth Town and Seafront Group, pages 40 to 20 in your agenda. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, Chair, thank you again. Very, very short report, Chair. We did have a discussion, and Cabinet had previously made a suggestion and a modification to the previous recommendation from the placemaking group in discussion with yourself and the Chair, and to make sure that we were doing things in response to an officer report. I've put together the report today, and it really sets out a very, very simple approach. So we're aware, and coming back on Councillor Davies' comment just made, and well made, the need for us to have a channel of dialogue at a senior level with our colleagues in the County Council has been identified. That is at a political level and also at a senior management level. The proposal is therefore to make a number of changes. The first is to set up a placemaking subgroup that will be with our senior political representatives and senior managers, so that we can overcome issues, as Ollie has just spoken about, where there is a shared interface in terms of land ownership, how we would overcome that by quite simply making sure that everyone is aware of what the aspiration is and put in place the wheels or the mechanisms to make that happen effectively. So the concept of a placemaking subgroup is therefore identified, and I set out the terms of reference. I've tried to keep it light touch. The concept being that we will write on behalf of Councillor Arnott as the leader to both Exmouth Town Council and Devon County Council, and we would ask them to nominate representatives to sit on the subgroup. In addition to that, there was also the aspiration to include more stakeholders, and the suggestion, therefore, is that we would write to stakeholder groups and ask them to nominate a representative to come onto the placemaking group as required. We set that out. It's not meant to be cumbersome, Chair. It's meant to, to try and just embrace some wider views as we move to the delivery phase, which WSP are going to talk about next. So I'm happy to take questions. I don't want to get down into the weeds of this unless anybody particularly needs to, Nick. But that's your call as the Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We've all had time to read the report, and let's see if we've got any questions. Councillor Davey, Ollie, thank you.
Sorry, Jerry, me again. Yes, and I've got a town councillor hat on again. I would just like to suggest that in the membership of the subgroup, which I'm generally happy about, whether it's possible to include the town clerk from Exmouth, mainly because she's such a useful conduit of information, and if she's up to speed on everything, then it's very useful for disseminating information to other councillors. She is on this group anyway. I'm not sure she's here today, actually, but I just felt it might be quite good to have her in there. And I'm drawing a bit of a parallel with Cranbrook, which I was attending yesterday, and which actually held up this group as an example of good cooperative working, so and a model of delivery. So I'm just wondering if that's possible for that to be included. She could be a non-voting member, but still as a kind of observer.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you also for the compliment, which is gratefully received. Over to you, Jerry. Yes, reply.
Chair, the placemaking group can make that recommendation if that's their wish, and we can modify the terms of reference to reflect that. I think you would need a proposer and a seconder. I'm sure Sarah will keep us right, and Anita if required.
Okay, thank you. Right, so another speaker called Councillor Arnott. Paul, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Jerry. I'd happily propose that. I think so we're not making it up on the hoof too much, whether that's a voting member or sort of ex officio in observing. I'm not certain, but absolutely extremely welcome, crucial, really, given the insight clearly that the Exmouth Town Clerk has on behalf of the people of Exmouth and the council. And clearly they really must be there, in my view, if that meets with the agreement of the placemaking group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We've had a proposal. Is there a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to second. Thank you, Nick.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Ollie, so
Sorry, Chair, can I just check? Is that on the basis of it being a non-voting member, which would probably sound more appropriate for the clerk, just so that we're clear?
I'd clarify that is my proposal. Happy to take an amendment. That is my proposal, Anita. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'd be happy with that as well. I think as it's councillors and they are voting members, I think it's probably not appropriate for the town clerk to be a voting member, but hopefully they won't require too much voting anyway.
right, okay. Jerry, please.
Sorry, Chair, loath to be a pedant on this one. Just the subgroup is non-executive. It will just make recommendations going forward. So the issue of executive or non-executive really isn't what's crucial. The elected members obviously will carry the recommendations and make proposals and what have you. So the idea is to get political cooperation at a high level, just so that we don't lose ourselves and create yet another body. Anita, are you okay with that?
I think so. As long as we're clear that on what roles people have, if there are any votes that need to be taken.
That's fine. We can amend that terms of reference to make sure that that's made abundantly clear. Chair, thank you. Sorry for that.
No, not
Chair,
at all.
do you want me just to pop to the vote? We could just, I think, we can probably just do it with a show of hands, if you may. Sarah, I'm not sure who's a member and who isn't, so you might just need to help. So members of this committee, all in favour of the recommendation as put forward, please. Oh, we've got a we haven't done Zoom for a while. We've got a little range of hands. 1, 2. I think that looks carried to me. Anyone against? Okay, Councillor Hook, where you've got a tick showing still. I imagine that's legacy.
Sorry, yeah, beg your pardon.
Okay, and anyone abstaining? No, that's lovely. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Anita.
Very much. Just before we move on, I want to clarify a position about the chair of the subgroup. Jerry, can you just inform us of what the proposal is there, please?
Chair, the position is that the group will have to be formed first and then elect a chair. I can make a suggestion, as I think I have discussed with you, that as we're the instigator of this initially, perhaps it should be EDDC as the chair, and then potentially, depending on how well the group works out in terms of functionality, we could rotate that chair on an ongoing basis. That would help to get engagement from our colleagues at both. I'm sure the town council will be fully engaged, but also our colleagues in the county council. Again, that's something that the group, when they meet first, can actually decide upon.
Right, good, thank you. That's clear for me. Councillor Davey, Ollie.
Just a quick comment that the Planning Advisory Service actually suggested against having that set up for the Cranbrook Strategic Delivery Board, I think it's actually called. They felt that in the interest of continuity, that it ought to be chaired by EDDC.
Okay, thank you.
Just perhaps warn against that arrangement, but this might be different.
Yes. Well, I think it is different. I mean, the two towns are are completely different in many ways. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I don't see any further hands raised. Thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is the presentation from WSP. So over to you, Gayatri. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nick Hockway, and good morning to everyone. I'll be sharing my screen to go through a presentation. Just give me literally 1 second. Okay, is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is. Yes.
Perfect. I can't see anyone, so please let me know if there are hands up at any point of the meeting. So moving on quickly, the agenda for today's meeting is to go through these items. One is, sort of a recap or a refresher of what we discussed at the previous presentation, and then I will go through the placemaking plan and the approach to delivery. After which I'll hand over to my colleague Ashira, who will be going through the business case and the investment strategy, and then we can quickly discuss about the next steps and moving on to the end of the presentation. So the previous presentation, which was, I think, held a few months back in 2023, we discussed, how we have arrived to this placemaking plan. We've gone through an engagement, 2 workshops, thorough workshops, understanding what is the aspirations from everyone in Exmouth, what is the vision that really we arrived to deciding upon or defining this various distinctive character areas, distinctive and nuanced, sort of aspirations of the community and the residents and councillors, and understanding, how do we then sort of strategically frame that in a vision and translate that into a framework. For the translation of the framework, we kind of came up with 6 strategic objectives and several actions that would help us, sort of deliver many of these interventions on ground. Most of these interventions we've kind of discussed at the last meeting of what they are. They range through all different types of interventions, specifically in the environmental and landscape, related to land and development, related to public realm, related to events, and many other sort of these aspects. So going through all of that, we've come to a point where we've kind of combined all of those different layers and different strategic objectives into defining a placemaking plan. That placemaking plan looks at all of these different layers, whether it's environmental, whether it's transport or movement, public realm, and has come up with 4 specific focus areas. The focus areas where many of the interventions come together to create a sort of a repositioning of the spatial organization or repositioning of that space into a new identity. Specifically, there are 4 areas such as the gateway, the town center, and Esplanade around just immediately in the context of the pavilion, and the Orcombe Point, which is at the end of the Queen's Drive. So we will go into sort of these design ideas or the concept ideas that we've come up with, which try to demonstrate how, if these actions were sort of translated into a spatial design, what does it mean? At the moment, these are more of just blue sky thinking ideas. So please take it as concepts and not literal translation into an intervention. They do demonstrate, what is out of the possible. So it's more of just identifying what's the potential of each of those spaces. So starting with the gateway, where there's a clear objective of how do we create a sense of place. To create that sense of place, we thought that there are 2 specific moves that will really unlock this place completely differently, to allow for a better sense of arrival, a welcoming space, an identity of Exmouth going forward. So a public space is created just as you arrive at the train station. But to be able to create a public space, the spatial organization needed the car park, the the leisure center, the railway organization building, all of these facilities to be consolidated into a new facility, which is what you can see on the diagram to the left, that a multi-story car park and a leisure center, which also will house a theater, which will be from the repurposed pavilion, to be organized in this space, creating a completely different identity to the gateway. As you arrive into Exmouth, there will be a public space that will provide those amazing views across the estuary and towards the town centre. It will be designed as an iconic and adaptable space that could be transformed into an event space. There will also be a new visitor center acting as a placemaking component, which could also be an iconic and a sculptural design to become a landmark. Along with this public space, there is an entertainment, sort of a green area. There is a well-designed children's play area for certain different types of activities. So apart from just an adaptable space, it's more of a green space. It's an entertaining sort of a recreational space for kids. There could also be an extended station forecourt to create that sense of arrival and the decision-making point, as in when you arrive, where would you want to head, within the town centre or towards the seafront? So combining all of these together, this creates a completely different reorganized space at the gateway. Moving on to the town centre. The town centre is centered around the Strand. There are many more, sort of opportunities to create more subtle and smaller spaces, public spaces, to create that wider network of and a sequence of public spaces, which will reposition the town centre as a pedestrian-friendly place. And by extending and expanding that expression of pedestrian-friendly spaces, we try to open up the town centre and bind at the same time to allow for different activities to take place in different areas of the town centre, such as the public space that could be created at the Tower Street Church adjacent to it, that could link into the Strand, which would be a very interesting sort of a smaller pocket park, or a smaller space, a quiet and a sort of a convivial space at the same time. The other one is near the Church Street, which could be created by extending the public space and introducing greening. Magnolia Center, which is suggested or recommended, could be repurposed for different activities. It could be for arts and culture related activities, at the same time opening up the yard at the back for event spaces. So there could be a variety and a range of spaces that could be created for more permanent and some temporary activities in the town center. The other two focus areas are the Esplanade and the Orcombe. At Esplanade, I think there is an interesting, coming together of family and sports related activities, starting with the pavilion side, where a new facility, a sports facility, could be designed to complement the leisure center. It need not be only a sports facility, but also combine, sort of arts and culture related activities within that unit. At the same time, by replacing the beach garden car park, a public space could be created along the seafront. And not just one public space, but also then starting to integrate many of the public spaces, or rather, sequence of spaces that could be created along the seafront. More green, more resilient, more sort of weatherproof, and for the future, in the way that could really allows for different activities to take place for different age groups, whether it's dog walking, whether it's sort of kids play area, whether it's events, all fitted with more contemporary and more infrastructure that is needed for events to take place. The cafe will be repurposed and redesigned with an improved setting in the public realm, so that becomes an anchor within that public realm setting. Along with many of these activities, a revitalized seafront public realm is created, which promotes recreational activities, walking and cycling. Along with that, these sculptural stairs, which provide access to the beach, can also be created as a means of seating that allows, offers views across the sea. So there are many of these interventions created along the seafront. We are mindful that these have to be sort of thought through and well designed in the next stages, where actually the existing seafront, or the line of seafront, needs to be investigated, surveyed, to be able to see whether there is a possibility to extend it and how far we can extend it, and needs to be much more a stable space. At the Orcombe point, which is really beyond the junction, the Mayor Street, is a point where the Queen's Drive can be transformed into a public space. Also, along with that is an opportunity to transform Foxhole's car park into an arts and culture hub. The rationale behind this entire intervention is to create a bookend where we have one end is a gateway, the other end is the Orcombe point that allows to, sort of explore Exmouth along the seafront in a very different expressions, whether it's through the town centre or it's along the seafront. There are many interesting spaces and experiences created. When you arrive at the Orcombe point, there is an arts and culture hub. The Orcombe point, the street itself, is transformed into a pedestrian space, although allowing more of emergency access. But obviously there is a replacement, or there is a loss of car park at Foxholes, which will be sort of taken up at the Mayor car park. So the consolidation happens to allow for same number of cars to be sort of car parking spaces to be delivered. So overall, I think there are many of these car parking spaces that have been reorganized throughout the town center. But to assure that the members here is not, the idea is not to lose any car park, but it's more of to consolidate the car parking spaces to allow, or create those spaces for different activities. So moving on to the next part of our presentation, all of these interventions and actions have been organized into a specific framework, and there is a specific idea of how do we want to deliver this framework. To deliver the framework, which is organized in sort of these challenges, themes, and strategic objectives and actions, there is certain parameters that have been considered to determine what and which actions could be delivered in the short, medium, or long term. But before we could understand, which ones, or determine which ones could be delivered in different phases, there were certain parameters such as the readiness and ease of implementation of the interventions that would help understand or the existing conditions and its dependency on other initiatives before creating that conducive setting. And therefore, these are measured through high, medium, or low. Similarly, some of these actions have a certain level of impact on other actions or overall experience of the town center, which is assessed by its capability to catalyze the transformation and unlock Exmouth, which is also measured as medium, high, and low categories. Costs, we've undertaken very high level estimated costs for all the actions to indicate the level of investment required, which also helps us understand, which are the interventions that would be able to secure funding in the short term. And also that's the more of the short term idea, but however, sort of in the long term, it helps us understand, what funding and resources are required for these to be translated into projects in the long term. So all of these different parameters have helped us define what is the time scale for delivery of these. So the time scales that we've kind of defined are short term is between 0 to 3 years, medium is between 3 to 5 years, and long term between 8 to 15 years. So moving on to all of these strategic objectives and actions, let's focus more on, the short-term sort of interventions. For each of these objectives, as you can see, the number one objective is to harness availability of land for development and tourism opportunities. There are certain interventions or actions such as transforming beach gardens car park, or attracting investment in training and skills facilities, or identify and provide affordable businesses. These are kind of the actions that there is a really high ease of implementation. They are ready. There is not much sort of a due diligence that is required, and hence their impact is also high, and hence the cost is fairly low. And therefore, these are identified as a short-term ideas. Some of the ideas are related to land specifically are between medium and long term. The long term specifically, such as reorganization of the spaces at the pavilion side, foxholes, or even at the gateway area. These are formed as a long term ideas because they do need a several interim sort of planning activities and identification of the size, identification of many of these sort of surveys and investigations to be able to create them as a project. So considering these are the kind of similar rationale for identifying whether it's short term, medium term, or long term, some of these are short term interventions. The second strategic objective, which is related to connected and continuous public realm to strengthen the relationship between the town centre and the seafront, there are specific activities or actions such as commissioning a signage strategy, or improving the setting of the Tower Street Church, or providing information boards at the nature reserve. These are identified as short term. There's only one which is identified as long term, which is the creation of a public space at the gateway areas. The other two are more of medium-term interventions. More on the second objective, commissioning of a comprehensive public realm strategy, or unlocking Pierhead car park to create a new public space, and commissioning a shopfront strategy. All of these interventions, which are fairly ready and fairly low cost, have been identified as short-term interventions. The third strategic objective, which is related to events and meanwhile activities, have several short-term activities. Such as promoting public art to complement heritage buildings, or creating opportunities for arts and culture by repurposing existing assets, or even to strengthen the experience at Queen's Drive space as a family hub. So all of these are identified as short-term activities because there is very limited spatial interventions. The spatial interventions that are sort of suggested are low cost and quick, the quick wins essentially. Quick active lifestyle offer in the town centre and the street front as a strategic objective 4 has only one short-term interventions, which is to create hubs within the town centre and the seafront to harness the opportunity to link into wider walking and cycling networks, such as the Queen's Drive or the Oakham Point, which is also a gateway into the Jurassic Coast walking and cycling routes. So where we would really suggest sort of creating hubs, as in providing the changing rooms, providing toilets, providing convenience, and much of the street furniture to create that, again, a sense of arrival, sense of space, which is the point where you embark on different journeys. Objective 5, single short-term intervention, which is to rationalize traffic movement and on-street car parking along the seafront. This will be a trial, sort of an investigation of, what are the different ways of minimizing traffic along the seafront. What are the different ways of reducing the on-street car parking? This is not a permanent solution. It's more of a short term to test and validate whether there are some of these actions that could become permanent in the long term. All the other actions, as you can see, are more of a medium term activities, because they would be much more related to car parking, transport movement on street, sort of suggested ideas of walking and cycling routes, delivering, sort of those improved capacity at the nodal car parks as well. Last strategic objective is to enhance and celebrate rich biodiversity and natural assets of Exmouth. There are no short-term activities. There are more of medium-term activities because these are highly dependent on releasing of space through all the other interventions to be able to enhance the biodiversity of flora and fauna, such as along the Queen's Drive, or linking gateway area with estuary by creating the public space, or even enhancing the town and the seafront by introducing a coastal planting palette. So all of these are dependent on many of these activities, other interventions, creating spaces, allowing those new spaces to be designed thoroughly to be able to enhance their look and feel and experience. So all of these collective different interventions are taken forward in the business case, specifically the short-term interventions. This is where I'll hand over to my colleague, Ashira. She could go through the business case and the investment strategy.
Great. Thank you very much, Gayatri, and good morning, everyone. My name's Ashira Pereira. I'm a principal consultant within WSP's economics team, and I'll be presenting the findings of the SOBC, the Strategic Outline Business Case, and the investment strategy note, which has been developed by WSP with the support of East Devon District Council. In this section of the presentation, I'll be discussing the overarching purpose and then the approach to developing the SOBC and the investment strategy, before then taking you through the findings in more detail. Gayatri, if you could go to the next slide, please. Right, so to begin with, the focus of the SOBC is really to develop a strategic narrative to describe the short-term interventions within the Exmouth placemaking plan, to show how these align with local and government priorities, why and how these interventions could be funded, and how some of the challenges within Exmouth's public realm could be surmounted through funding this part of the Exmouth placemaking plan. I'll shorten that to EPP from now on. And the focus of the investment strategy is to outline the existing and potential funding sources and to see how the interventions align with these funding sources. The difference between the two documents, the strategic outline business case and the initial investment strategy, is really about the interventions under the EPP. The SOBC focuses purely on short-term interventions, and the investment strategy note covers all of them. So moving on, the SOBC has been developed using best practice guidance as per the Treasury Green Book 5-case business case model. And this approach looks at the business case through 5 different lenses, and these are listed here. First of all, we have the strategic case. So that explores the rationale for the EPP and its alignment with local, regional and national priorities. There's the economic case, which appraises the costs, benefits to the extent possible, and the impacts of each short-term intervention. There's the financial case, which appraises costs, affordability, and funding availability. The commercial case, which outlines the possible commercial and procurement arrangements at this early stage of the business case. And finally, the management case, which outlines the delivery processes, possible risk management, and then results monitoring. Gayatri, if we can move on to the next slide, please. So the next 3 slides I'm going to present summarize the analysis relating to the strategic fit of these short-term interventions that Gayatri already outlined. And this slide here maps out broadly and very qualitatively the extent to which each of the 13 short-term interventions aligns with the priorities of the EDDC plan 21 to 23, the EDDC local plan 2020 to 2040, and finally the Devon County Council plan 2021 to 2025. In terms of the first one, the EDDC plan, the interventions align most closely with priorities such as a greener East Devon, a resilient economy, while still ensuring some alignment with providing better homes and communities for all. In terms of the EDDC local plan, this has 11 objectives, as you'll know, and the short-term interventions align with most of the priorities and really with the idea of promoting a vibrant town centre. And finally, the Devon County Council plan suggests that when conducting this mapping exercise, the comprehensive public realm design strategy and the transformation of the car parks across all 6 priorities are aligned. But the overarching point here is that the short-term interventions do have strong alignment with these plans. We note that the EDDC 21 to 23 plan is, the next stage of this is under development. So future work on this business case will need to consider the priorities of the next plan once it's finalised. But for now, the underlying message is that of strong alignment between the suite of interventions and the respective plans. At the national level, there is strong alignment of the short-term interventions with the latest Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill 2023. In particular, the emphasis on bringing empty buildings back into use and breathing life back into empty high streets, and also making it faster for local authorities to give hospitality businesses the permission to use outdoor seating. Gayatri, perhaps we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So this slide here identifies the case for change in Exmouth's public realm, and we highlight here the 3 key needs for change in Exmouth. So to start off with, we have the lack of economic dynamism, employment opportunities, and challenging demographic profile. To elaborate a little bit more on this, Exmouth has an abundance of high-value natural assets and attractions. However, the town itself and its public infrastructures are not of the same level. There's also a lack of demand in Exmouth. That is because Exmouth is heavily reliant on seasonal tourism visitors, and most of the major employers within the East Devon economic area will be based in Exeter. This is compounded by a smaller than average working age population, and the tendency for younger people to leave Exmouth once they receive higher qualifications and they find work elsewhere. The solution here could be to make Exmouth more attractive for younger people so that they stay and they capitalise on work from home capabilities post-pandemic. The second challenge we have here is about motor vehicle dominated streets in the public realm. Again, to speak about this a bit more, and I think it's been alluded to earlier in the presentation and in the discussions, the distribution of car parking is a major factor in Exmouth, with multiple car parks that don't have a hugely high density of capacity. And so traffic is then distributed across the whole town and seafront, creating car-dominated spaces, which is especially relevant during the peak summer period. So the solution here would be to concentrate traffic and parking in certain areas in order to free up other areas of spaces for economic and social activities. And finally, we have challenge 3. It's the lack of development opportunities and investment and innovation. And this is very much tied to economic and demographic factors, which are in turn influenced by and influence the activities and infrastructure offered by Exmouth. Again, the solution here would be to perhaps use some of the EPP to create new spaces for economically active population to remain in Exmouth. The impact of not changing, of course, is then the lack of economic activities, the continued disjointed public realm, and then persistent lack of investment and prospects for innovation. So this slide is really about, looking at the need for change and how the EPP and the short-term interventions therein can help this in the short term. Gayatri, next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through some of the key drivers for change. These are kind of a combined effect of macroeconomic factors and social factors, together with those that are more specific to Exmouth. So to begin with, in terms of the macro picture, the key drivers are a combined effect of multiple pressures triggered and accelerated by COVID-19, the cost of living crisis, potential recession or low growth environment, as well as changing trends in people's behaviour in economics. And the result of all of this is changes to retail and hybrid working. There's more emphasis on the climate emergency and an increasing need from communities for open spaces, recreation opportunities, and collective experiences. When I talk about the more specific factors for Exmouth, and to unpack these a bit, when we're talking about the need to unlock the power of place, there is a huge potential in Exmouth to unlock the power of place, from a better arrival experience to improvements within the town centre. So crucially, there is a need to better connect the town to the seafront, and this can work as an economic driver for the town and seafront's growth and vibrancy overall. When we refer to the right mix of land and activity uses, Exmouth has a variety of outdoor leisure and sports facilities, including water sports facilities on the estuary and the seafront. And there are several flexible spaces that are being adapted for different uses. However, some of the land is still not utilised effectively, and it could be remedied by repurposing some of the assets, carrying out some retrofitting and making land use more flexible. When we speak of meanwhile opportunities, these are mechanisms to tackle the unused space and to generate short-term revenues. And this in turn can help increase footfall, promote a sense of community, and be a testing ground for new businesses. And finally, as you all know, the climate change resilience piece is a challenge everywhere, especially in places such as Exmouth, which directly interface with and benefit from natural environments. And it's hoped that the interventions within the EPP present this opportunity for an offer that's linked to natural environments that also highlight how sustainable tourism and growth can complement the natural habitats surrounding Exmouth. So this concludes the section on the strategic case, and in that I've demonstrated the strong alignment of the short-term interventions with Exmouth and DCC's plans, as well as the need for change and key drivers for change in Exmouth. In the next 3 slides, these are going to cover the economic case, and what they'll do is outline the options for change. We'll consider a preferred option and how it aligns with key themes in the EPP framework, the critical success factors, and finally providing a very high-level initial summary of costs and benefits for this early business case stage. This slide here shows how the interventions have been packaged into different options for the assessment in the business case. The first option is a do-nothing scenario where no interventions take place. The second is a do minimum scenario, and this is around improving wayfinding around Exmouth. So you'll see here that there are 3 short-term interventions: that of having the signage strategy, providing information boards around the main nature reserve and also to signpost heritage trails. And the third is creating town centre hubs, as Gayatri has already mentioned with some of the visuals earlier in the presentation. Option 3, which is called Do Moderate, is around improving the quality of place using Exmouth's existing assets. So this is about promoting public art to complement the heritage buildings, commissioning a shopfront design strategy, a pilot study which looks at trying to rationalise traffic movement along the seafront. So the potential to look at a car park that could be closed down to then see the impact on traffic flows. And finally, strengthening the experience at Queen's Drive space and turning it into, more of family hub and supporting that family hub. This option 3 also includes the interventions from option 2. So in total, it will have 7 interventions, including the signage strategy, information boards, and town centre hubs. We then have option 4, which is Do Maximum. So this is around creating new spaces and destinations through transformative projects. It combines all of the aforementioned interventions from the signage strategy through to strengthening the experience at Queen's Drive space, but it also adds in transforming some of the car parks into open spaces for public use. It's about commissioning a comprehensive public ground design strategy, and also creating opportunities for arts and culture by repurposing assets. It's about redesigning the public realm at Tower Street Church, and then conducting a study on business occupancy. So these are the 4 main options. And if we move to, the next slide, we find here this is how we've mapped out each of those options against the key themes within the EPP. So that's strengthening the local economy, opportunities for development, inclusive and prosperous communities, and sustainable built environment. And we've also mapped those 4 options against some critical success factors. So those include the strategic fit and meeting local needs, providing potential value for money, achievability of the option, looking at capacity and capability requirements, and also affordability and cost of the suite of interventions as well. Here we've provided a red, amber, green rating. It should really be seen as a qualitative measure at this very early stage. And broadly, it shows that the Do Maximum option is the one that ticks the most boxes in terms of the EPP themes and most of the critical success factors. And some of the factors that influence the choice of that preferred option, the Do Maximum option, is that this option comprises a combination of initiatives focusing on improving wayfinding, improving the quality of place using Exmouth's existing assets, and also creating new spaces and destinations through transformative projects. Some of the interventions across all of those categories are complementary, and ultimately they'll benefit residents, workers, and visitors to Exmouth. And all of the initiatives that come under option 4 have the potential to increase footfall around Exmouth town centre as well as at the seafront. And in turn, that's likely to promote healthy business activity around both the town as well as the tourism focus at the seafront. Sorry, Gayatri, still got a little bit more to go through.
Sorry.
Back, that's okay. And then there are some, reasons why we've also chosen this as the preferred option is that it allows Exmouth to think strategically about its public realm. There is the potential to improve wayfinding and signage, and also it maximises the use of car parks and looks at rationalising traffic movements and prioritising pedestrians and cyclists. In terms of looking at it mapped against the critical success factors, as mentioned before, there is strong alignment with the district and county council plans. There is potential value for money because it improves the coherence of the town centre and linkages to the seafront. In terms of affordability, cost and achievability, there is potential funding via a combination of existing EDDC capital budgets, central government funding and other grants. So it'll really be dependent on the availability of those resources. And finally, in terms of capacity and capability, these interventions we've estimated can be delivered in the 3-year timeframe, provided there is strong stakeholder expertise and buy-in. So I think, yes, thank you, Gayatri. So in this final slide for the economic case, we take you through a summary of the cost-benefit appraisal. So the cost-benefit analysis was conducted in line with Treasury and Department for Levelling Up Housing Community guidelines. Before I take you through some of the facts and figures, I'd like to say that there are a few assumptions that we've applied at this early stage of the business case. First of all, the impacts that we measure are additional to the business as usual or do nothing scenario. The costs and the benefits are based on EDDC staff and running costs and the costs of the interventions themselves, such as the construction costs, site investigation, consultancy services. Some of the assumptions are based on Exmouth 2015 and 2022 visitor survey data, and also looking at similar and existing interventions in other locations. We've conducted various elements of sensitivity testing on the data, the impacts have been calculated over a 10-year appraisal period. In terms of the monetizable benefits we see here on the left-hand side, these are estimates from only 4 of the 13 interventions. So this is specifically related to costs and benefits of the town hubs, the Queen's Drive space as a family hub, and then opening up beach gardens and pierhead car parks to be green open spaces. So really, when we're looking at these benefits, it's just a slice of the 13 interventions. And the reason for this is that at this stage of the business case, there are only kind of certain elements of the suite of interventions that can have a monetizable benefit. What you'll see on the right-hand side is that actually several impacts associated with the EPP haven't been monetized, given the nature of the interventions and the appropriateness of appraising them within the economic model, but they should be considered as part of the overall business case. So with the monetizable benefits on the left, there is potential to create between 14 and 35 net direct jobs across the 4 interventions alone, and just over 10 indirect and induced jobs. In terms of the annual gross value added from employment creation related to those 4 interventions, this could be in the realm of almost 260,000 to 650,000 pounds per year. Amenity benefits that come from an improved environment, a more tranquil environment, could be just under 120,000 pounds per hectare per annum. And then there are also public health benefits associated with new cycle infrastructure, secure cycle parking, and cycle hubs as well. In terms of the non-monetizable benefits across all 13 interventions, some of these relate to the attractiveness of the seafront and the town centre, which increases footfall and visitor spend and increases job opportunities. There may be a better place image for Exmouth and greater investment for businesses. There could be improvements in labour market and skills because of the new jobs that are generated for local people. And as well as that, just a summary of the few remaining bullet points, improved accessibility of the town centre and seafront, improved connectivity between walking and cycling routes, benefits related to enhancing public art and public spaces, as well as physical and mental wellbeing benefits and greater sense of community as well. Gayatri, if we can move to the next slide, please. So thank you. So this slide really summarises some of the financial case that is part of a wider report, which will be shared with you all. The cost estimates for the financial case are based on desktop research, as I mentioned before, looking at similar interventions elsewhere in the UK, and also on engagement with EDDC employment and running costs. So in the base cost for the do maximum option 4 is in the region of just under £6 million over 2024 to 2026. And most of these costs would be front loaded to 2024, so the first of the 3-year period. It's anticipated that EDDC would be the primary funding source via the council's own capital funding, the Place and Prosperity Fund, the Levelling Up Fund, and various East Devon programmes under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And other potential funding sources, which I'll talk about in the investment strategy section, could be financial support from Devon County Council through private sector funding, and also grants from charitable organisations such as National Lottery and the Heritage Fund. Great. And then moving on to the commercial case. So here is where we have actually outlined what a preferred delivery route would be at this time. So we would suggest a public ownership model would be most appropriate for conducting these short-term interventions. They provide the greatest role for EDDC and the ability to own the implementation process. It would also involve local authorities fully funding the capital and operating expenditure. The public realm infrastructure would be owned by EDDC, with any back office activities also implemented by EDDC or a third party. But most importantly, there is the ability to ensure that equity of access to the public realm and enabling EDDC to achieve wider social and environmental goals. The things to consider are looking at risk mitigation and management of the delivery process if it is all under EDDC's control, and then also, as has been mentioned earlier in the meeting, reaching any agreements on assets that are not owned by EDDC or that are jointly owned together with Devon County Council. In terms of the procurement route, the preferred model would be confirmed at the next stage of the business case once the delivery model, which is on the left, is also confirmed as the preferred option. But regardless of that, the preferred procurement route would need to align with the key themes of EDDC's procurement strategy for 2022 to 27, and it would also need to align with EDDC's existing contract standing orders and rules so that it promotes good procurement practice, public accountability, commercial enterprise, and it also deters corruption. Gayatri, next slide, please. Great. And then the final of the 5 cases is the management case. So I'll quickly take you through this slide. What the management case covers is areas such as looking at project management and governance and what the model would be there, what the project dependencies could be, and this is given the early stage of the business case. Of course, this could be further developed. Also, what are potential risks to delivery, as well as looking at a governance structure, so the roles and responsibilities of key stakeholders. So to take you through the project management and governance, again, as this, we're suggesting a public ownership model, EDDC would promote, administer and manage any short-term interventions. It's potential that the Place and Prosperity team would lead delivery and collaborate with other EDDC teams, and then there would be a designated PM within the Place and Prosperity team who would lead the project. The dependencies to be wary of are whether there's timely and sufficient funding for interventions, whether there are appropriate agreements in place where EDDC does not own certain assets. There also needs to be successful selection of consultants with the appropriate expertise, and for EDD staff to have time for project coordination. The types of risks would need to follow EDDC's risk management protocol and systems, and a process of risk identification, assessment, management, reporting needs to be followed, and a risk register would need to be established at a further stage of the business case. And in terms of roles and responsibilities, typically we would expect to see a senior responsible owner, a steering group, which I think has already been discussed in this and previous meetings, perhaps a working group, which has detailed oversight at the intervention level, and then other supporting teams within EDDC for delivering those interventions. In terms of a timescale and the remaining tasks, after this strategic outline business case would be submitted and approved, there would need to be an outline business case and full business case submission and approval, and then the implementation of short-term interventions that would start from this year and lead until 2026. That's a broad summary of what the timescales could be potentially. So I think this is really wrapped up the 5 cases and the business case model. What the business case model has been able to take you through is demonstrating the strong fit of the interventions, looking at the preferred option for implementing, and the financial cases looked at the funding requirements for the do maximum option. And then we've also looked at possible considerations for procurement of services and management of implementation. What we now moved on to is a summary of the investment and funding strategy that has been developed. And just keep in mind, this is across all interventions under the EPP, not just the short-term ones. So the first thing we did was conduct a mapping exercise of the different funding types that might be available to Exmouth. So this could be funding from local authorities, such as the EDDC capital funding, the Place and Prosperity Fund, funding from Devon County Council, funding through One Public Estate for Devon County Council. There's also central government funding through Levelling Up, through Shared Prosperity and the Community Ownership Fund. There's also charitable organisations such as the National Lottery, all the various kind of streams of funding that are available there, as you can see, with different durations and different amounts. There's also the Heritage Fund, Art Council England, which might be relevant for promoting arts and culture in Exmouth, and finally some private funding sources as well. We know that there is some interest from the private sector within Exmouth, so that could be a potential funding source. Gayatri, if you can move to the next slide, please. So we conducted a similar mapping exercise, looking at each of the different types of funding against each of the short-term, medium-term and long-term interventions. And for the purposes of time, what I'll do is just draw out what the key points are from that analysis. In terms of the short-term interventions, there is potential for EDDC and Devon County Council to provide funding for some of these interventions within the next 3 years. That's the short-term interventions. The UK SPF could be the next most potential funding source. Certain interventions, such as the shopfront strategy, the Queen's Drive, refurbishments, and then Beach Gardens car park being opened up into a public space, these could be aligned with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund cultural programmes, and we know that EDDC is keen to promote cultural and leisure offers. And then there is potential for smaller interventions to be suitable for National Lottery funding. If we move on to the medium-term interventions, so this would be funding within the next 6 years, the Place and Prosperity Fund could fund interventions that redefine the purpose and role of the town centre, create open spaces within the town centre, and improve coherency of the town centre and its linkage to the seafront. So several interventions could also be aligned with Devon County Council funding, in particular rationalising the traffic movements within Exmouth and that pilot study, looking at a potential park and ride system, and then consolidating existing car parking space within Exmouth. And we know that within the Shared Prosperity Fund, there are certain programmes such as the Leisure Programme and the town's feasibility programmes and the Active Travel Fund, which could also be relevant funding sources. Gayatri, final slide, please. Great. And then when we look at long-term interventions, here, our estimation is that principal funding sources would need to be EDDC and Devon County Council for those long-term 8 to 15-year interventions. The UK SPF Leisure Programme is relevant to interventions such as repurposing the pavilion site, reorganising activities to create a public space at the station area, and developing a cluster approach to the sports offer around the side shore. There is also opportunities for interested private investors to explore investing, reimagining Foxholes car park into an arts and culture hub. And there's also potential for developer contributions, such as through Section 106 contributions and community infrastructure levies. A final kind of concluding set of findings and some next step is that public funding alone may not be sufficient to fund all of the interventions. Some of the interventions could be funded through a mixture of public, private and charitable sources. Swift action is needed to explore securing funding, especially when we're looking at the timeframe of the short-term interventions starting this year until 2026. National Lottery funding could be a complementary source to other funding sources already. And finally, EDDC could consider a future role as being an enabler and a facilitator for leveraging private financing sources into Exmouth. Thank you very much for listening. That concludes the sections on the strategic outline business case and on the investment and funding strategy. And I'm passing back on to Gayatri for next steps.
Thank you, Ashira. This one slide sort of, captures what we have undertaken so far. We've done the refinement of the placemaking plan delivery framework, finalized the strategic outline business case, and finalized the investment strategy. But what we still have outstanding, and that depends on, the feedback we receive from today's meeting and many more discussions with EDDC, is to prepare the development briefs and the HRA guidance, which will wrap up our project and a final placemaking plan. So thank you very much for listening, and that really is the last slide of our presentation. I'm going to stop sharing there. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Gayatri and Ash, for a most comprehensive presentation. Excuse me. Okay. So I have already seen some hands up, and so we'll go first of all, please, to Councillor Eleanor Rylance. Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for that really like visionary document we've just seen. As a councillor, you probably expect me to have an eye on the figures, the money, and I'm just wondering whether do we have any undertakings from any of the anticipated partners in this that they might be able to contribute, and or was it the community something or other fund, CIF? Can't remember. The one that's anticipated to be able to supply a significant amount of the money. I noticed that it said that the fund shuts in March 2025. If we were successful in any bids from that fund, would any undertaking continue for a number of years, or would it be a one-off, or would it disappear with the funds in 2025? Thank you.
Councillor Oakwood, do you want us to respond to questions right away, or should we wait until the end of the session?
I think Jerry's got a hand up there, so Jerry. Jerry, you're on mute.
So sorry. Thank you, Councillor Rylance. Thank you, Chair. Schoolboy error, my fault. We don't have any firm funds at the minute of any substantive nature. The funds that have been identified are still at this point in time aspirational. In terms of any funds that would potentially close down next year, that would be subject to the letter of offer that would be issued, and normally there's a closeout period that allows for that to happen. That's just down to the terms and conditions. I mean, we're particularly focused on the various internal funds that we have and how we could use those best. You'll see that right across the board, we have actually been at pains to actually analyze, and the team have spent a lot of time analyzing the various other strategies that have been produced by colleagues in the council. So there are pots of money that are potentially available there, but that'll be subject to us all having that discussion, that negotiation going forward, Chair. Happy for Councillor Rylance to come back if you wish, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rylance, did you wish to come back?
No, I think that's enough of an answer for the time being. Thank you. I suspect probably more people will ask similar things as we go forwards.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to Councillor Davey. Ollie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to thank you very much for that presentation. I think all along you've shown a very incisive understanding of Exmouth as a town, and you've given us a really good analysis of what is happening and what is not happening, and what kind of place it is. And you come up with some really exciting proposals. I like the way it thinks outside the box, or it seems to me that it's incredibly ambitious. But you're also saying all this could be delivered for £6 million, which I'm getting used to big numbers. And actually £6 million in the context of some government and even council projects doesn't sound too bad to me. So it kind of feels as though we could do this. On a sort of micro level, in terms of the info boards, I would like those to acknowledge our cultural and historical heritage as well, because I've never felt we made enough of that in Exmouth. And we have had famous painters and various people have visited the place over the years, and we could make more of that. What I wanted to really ask you, and either of you could answer this, is how do you see the role of consultation? Because I think it's really important that we listen to local people as we go along. There are a lot of people in Exmouth with knowledge and expertise. They know the place, and they also have individual expertise that we can often draw on, and use their ideas, not just run a consultation, say, yeah, thanks very much, but we're going to do what we were going to do anyway. And I'm not going to make any reference to ongoing projects at the moment that are not doing that. But it's really important that we avoid the people of Exmouth feeling that this is being done to them. you said on one of the slides that EDDC needs to own the implementation process. Well, I agree with that, but it needs to also be owned by the people of Exmouth. Unless we ensure that we take the people of Exmouth with us, we are going to get a lot of pushback. And it's not always because people don't like what we're doing, but they resent the fact that they weren't asked, they weren't told, and they weren't involved. So please, let's make sure that we really use meaningful consultation. We've made a good start. We've brought in lots of people on some of the visioning sessions, and I'd like to see that kind of thing continue, so that we make sure that we bring the people of Exmouth with us, because we cannot run this and deliver it without the buy-in of the people of Exmouth.
Thank you, Ollie. Yes, absolutely agree with what you say. I just remind you about our terms of reference, which we've agreed to amend. That we said we would bring in other people, other stakeholders who've got ideas. We certainly do want to listen to what we've done. We've done quite a bit of consultation already, and excuse the rattle. And we will do so in the future. I also think we need to make sure that we explain our plan in an approachable manner to residents of Exmouth to see the benefits that it's going to give. I think it's really important that we allow residents to understand that the economic benefits that this plan can deliver are quite significant. We have now in the process of removing uncertainty. People can see where we're going to be in the next 10 years and what we're planning, and also what we're not planning to do. And I think the fact that we're keeping certain ideas out of our plan is just as important as what we are showing that we are going to keep in our plan. And I think the other point, which is really important, is by having our 10-year plan, we are going to show confidence. We're going to give confidence to people. And I think confidence for businesses is a really important thing. And if our plan can do that at all, I think that would be a major achievement. But I do take your point, absolutely, I do. Okay, but thank you for that question. So moving on to Councillor Young. Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. That was really interesting. As I'm not talking as a user of Exmouth Seafront today, which I enjoy immensely at most times of the year, including the blow along the beach on Sunday. But I'm talking now as with my portfolio hat on. Climate resilience, which we need to consider in all of these projects. We need to consider the engineering that we'll have to consider, and the big elephant in the castle, big elephant in the room at the moment is South West Water, and we obviously need to work with the Environment Agency and on the engineering and the climate resilience, and we need to work with South West Water with their infrastructure at the moment, because South West Water pumping station is at Mere Road car park, and there's tanks underneath the car park, which we would have to consider that when we're putting a multi-storey car park there. We've also got sewage tanks underneath Imperial Road car park, and again we'll have to consider that. Having a car park and a sports hall above a sewage tank, there's question marks there. We also need to work with highways because of their parking, the roads, and from experience of developing our new town, there's a lot of lessons that we need to learn, that we need to be talking with highways, we need to be talking to the Environment Agency, we need to be talking to South West Water. And so it all forms part of a jigsaw. We're well aware that South West Water are making big investments in Exmouth, and this project, a lot of these things will need to fit hand in hand with what they want to do. So really exciting looking at it, some really fantastic improvements. But as I say, we need to be working with our partners on this and making sure they deliver at the same time as we do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Absolutely crucial points you've raised there. Climate resilience is obviously one that's high on the agenda at the moment with the repairs to the seawall. Absolutely agree with what you're saying about working with partners. But with our plan now, with our EPP, we can say to partners, look, this is what we're working towards, and this is what we want you to help us achieve. And you have to tell people what you want. Otherwise, they're in the dark, and we don't want people in the dark. We want people to know, look, this is what we're doing. This is our plan. This is what we're going to achieve. How can you help us? Okay, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't always do this, but I'm going to come in a bit glass half full, if I may. I think this is an extraordinary document that has been a long time in the works and has flowed entirely from the work of this committee and the officers of this committee. And I think we should just spend a moment as a committee, I don't know, what do you say, patting yourself slightly on the back. Because if you go back 3 or 4 years and you see how Exmouth had been changed and how it was proposed to be changed, you had something that was not really being consulted on in a way that's expected in the 2020s. And that's absolutely true. That isn't true anymore at all. This committee has representation from many places. Over the course of the last couple of years, Jerry has run open and extensive consultations with the public in Exmouth already. They have already had a huge opportunity to input, but of course, it is vital and very welcome that the people of Exmouth who own this really continue to be consulted, and there's no doubt about that. I think the agenda item before this, which we passed, is also critical. We can't have silo thinking when something like this is so important. A committee where town and district and council sit and work for the common good on a shared vision is not just helpful, it's vital. And I think this document will provide much food for thought, not only for this committee, but also for the group working with the other authorities. I think the other thing is what we didn't have before this, in truth, what the council has never had before this, is a proper strategic vision that covers many years. We have it now. Now, of course, we can disagree with it, we'll debate it, we can say, well, that's rubbish, well, that's great. But it's there. We've got something now. We've got the textbook, so to speak. We can now do our studies properly rather than just flying off in various trivialized political directions, which I think has always happened in all local politics. But it has happened in Exmouth rather a lot over the years. And I do point you to that famous book by R.L. Delderfield, which was satirizing Exmouth local politics. I think he wrote it in 1946. So I think this has turned the page on that approach. We're not there anymore. But the other thing I want to say also, Chair, and I think this is very important, is that I have no idea if this will be reported, this meeting, or not. It may go completely under the radar. If it is, I think it's really important that we stress for the press and for the public, these are ideas. So it wouldn't be very helpful to have a headline coming up in the next few days saying Exmouth about to be transformed in multi-million-pound scheme. No, it isn't. Exmouth and East Devon and Devon County and Exmouth Town Council are thinking about how they might be able to do something like that. So we are at step one on a 100-step journey. I think that's really important. So I say that because the minute you put an open document out there like this out there, there is a risk of people piling in, particularly around the time of a general election. Oh, this is all unrealistic. What a load of old hogwash. You know, we're nowhere near the stage. We are at the stage of discussing and thought. And I'd like to thank you, Chair, in particular, and Jerry, and our advisors here for putting forward a really remarkable piece of work. I have no idea how we move it forward from here, Chair, and what decisions we make on it. I'd have thought this is going to keep us chatting for the next few meetings, to be honest. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, for those kind words. Yes, it is a strategic, excuse me, it is a plan at a strategic level. It is also a plan that fits into our local plan. And I think it is extremely important that we get across the message that Exmouth must have a part of the local plan. It must have its place in the local plan. And people must understand of the ideas and the considerations that we're giving forward, and also those things that will not be there. We are saying that the EPP says that Exmouth is a place where environment is important, where we wish to strengthen the economy, where we wish to give confidence to investors to invest in. Right, it is, and that is an important part of the local plan and our council plan as well. We wish to see strong communities, resilient economies, and and care for the environment. Now, this will take some time to go through. It is a very comprehensive report. I'm very pleased with this report. I think it is a very honest report, and it will give us a lot of time to think and a lot to chew over. So, thank you. Now, Councillor Arnott, do you wish to come back? You're on mute, Councillor Arnott.
Just to say, Chair, can all of my waffle of the previous 3 minutes be struck for the record? But because what you just said in 60 seconds absolutely captured it. So thank you, Chair. That's the quote we need to come out with. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish I'd written it down. Okay, so if there are, I don't see any more hands. I would also like to put on record my thanks to Gayatri and Ash for a very comprehensive, very professionally delivered presentation. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, so so that brings our meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone for their attendance. May I remind everyone that until the supporting officer confirms that we're no longer live, your comments will be